The shrill ring of my phone pierced the quiet of my studio, shattering my concentration. I glanced at the caller ID and felt my stomach lurch. Ethan, my ex-husband. I hadn't heard from him in 3 years, not since our messy divorce. With trembling fingers, I answered. Laura. His voice was cold, accusatory. What have you done to my parents? I blinked, caught off guard. Ethan, what are you talking about? Don't play dumb with me, he snarled. Mom and Dad are broke, and they're saying you're the reason why. What kind of sick game are you playing? My mind reeled. I hadn't spoken to Grace and Arnold in years, not since Ethan had left me for my sister, Rachel. I haven't seen your parents since before the divorce, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. I have no idea what you're talking about. Liar! Ethan's voice rose to a shout. They've been sending you money for years, and now they can't even afford their medications. How could you do this to them? To me? I felt a surge of anger. How dare he accuse me of such a thing? After everything he'd done? Listen to me, Ethan, I said, my voice hard. I don't know what's going on with your parents, but I have nothing to do with it. Maybe you should look closer to home for answers. There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Ethan spoke again, his voice was low and menacing. I'm warning you, Laura. If I find out you've been manipulating my parents, I'll make you pay. You won't get away with this. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, my heart pounding. What the hell was going on? I barely had time to process the conversation when my studio door burst open. My assistant, Megan, rushed in, her face pale. Laura, there's a man downstairs causing a scene. He's demanding to see you. My blood ran cold. What does he look like? Megan's eyes widened. Tall, dark hair, expensive suit. He says he's your ex-husband. Oh, God, I muttered. I should have known Ethan wouldn't let it go. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Okay, Megan, call security. I'll deal with this. I made my way downstairs, my mind racing. As I reached the lobby, I saw him. Ethan, looking as handsome and arrogant as ever, was shouting at the receptionist. Ethan, I called out, my voice sharp. What do you think you're doing? He whirled to face me, his eyes blazing with fury. You, he spat. You think you can ruin my family and get away with it? I stood my ground, aware of the growing crowd of onlookers. I haven't done anything to your family, Ethan. You're the one who destroyed ours, remember? His face contorted with rage. He took a step towards me, his fists clenched. Don't you dare turn this around on me. My parents trusted you, and you betrayed them. I felt a flicker of fear, but I refused to show it. Your parents haven't contacted me in years, Ethan. Whatever's going on with them has nothing to do with me. Liar, he roared, lunging forward. Suddenly, 2 security guards appeared, grabbing Ethan's arms. He struggled against them, his face red with fury. This isn't over, Laura, he shouted as they dragged him away. I'll make you pay for this. As the doors closed behind him, I sagged against the wall, my heart pounding. What had just happened? And more importantly, what was I going to do now? I looked up to see my entire staff staring at me, their faces a mix of shock and concern. I straightened up, forcing a calm I didn't feel. Show's over, folks, I said, my voice only slightly shaky. Back to work, please. As they dispersed, Megan approached me, her eyes wide. Laura, are you okay? Should I call the police? I shook my head, my mind already racing ahead. No, not yet, but I need you to clear my schedule for the rest of the day. I have some calls to make. As I headed back to my office, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Whatever was going on with Ethan and his parents, I had a sinking feeling that my life was about to get a lot more complicated. I closed my eyes, letting the warm water of the shower wash over me, trying to rinse away the stress of the day. As I stepped out, wrapping myself in a towel, my mind drifted back to happier times, times when Ethan and I were newlyweds, full of hope and dreams. Laura, honey, I'm home. Ethan's voice echoed through our apartment, jolting me from my reverie. I quickly dressed and made my way to the living room. There he stood, my handsome husband, a bouquet of roses in his hand and a mischievous glint in his eye. What's the occasion? I asked, unable to keep the smile from my face. He pulled me close, his lips brushing my ear. Do I need an occasion to spoil my beautiful wife? I melted into his embrace, savoring the moment. This was the Ethan I fell in love with, charming, thoughtful, and completely devoted to me. But as I pulled away, I caught a whiff of unfamiliar perfume on his collar. My stomach clenched. but I pushed the thought aside. I was being paranoid, surely. "I have news," Ethan said, his excitement palpable. "The company's sending me to New York for a big project. It's a huge opportunity, Laura." My heart sank. "How long will you be gone?" "Just a couple of weeks," he assured me. "And guess what? Your sister Rachel's coming to stay while I'm away. She's between apartments and needs a place to crash. You two can have some quality sister time." I forced a smile, but inside, alarm bells were ringing. Rachel and I had never been close. She was younger, wilder, and had a knack for causing trouble wherever she went. "That's great," I lied, my mind already racing with potential disasters. The next morning, as Ethan left for the airport, Rachel arrived in a whirlwind of designer luggage and drama. "Laura, darling," she exclaimed, air kissing my cheeks. "It's been too long. This is going to be so much fun." I nodded, already exhausted. "Let me show you to the guest room." As we walked, Rachel chattered incessantly. "Oh, by the way, I ran into Ethan at the airport. He looked so dashing in his suit. You're such a lucky woman, Laura." I froze. The airport? But Ethan left hours ago. Rachel's eyes widened, then quickly narrowed. "Oh, did I say airport? I meant the coffee shop. Yes, that's it. I saw him at the coffee shop before he left." My suspicions, which had been simmering for weeks, suddenly boiled over. Rachel was lying, and badly at that. But why? Over the next few days, Rachel's presence grated on my nerves. She was constantly on her phone, giggling at texts and taking hushed calls in the hallway. When I asked about her job search or apartment hunting, she'd wave me off with vague excuses. One evening, I returned home early from work to find Rachel frantically stuffing something into her purse. "What are you doing?" I demanded. She jumped, guilt flashing across her face before she composed herself. "Nothing, just organizing my things. Why are you home so early?" I stepped closer, my eyes locked on her purse. "What are you hiding, Rachel?" "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped, clutching the purse to her chest. "You're so paranoid, Laura. No wonder Ethan—" She cut herself off abruptly. "No wonder Ethan what?" I pressed, my heart pounding. Rachel's face hardened. "Nothing. Forget I said anything." But I couldn't forget. That slip, combined with everything else, painted a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't ignore. That night, as Rachel slept, I crept into the guest room. My hands shook as I opened her purse, dreading what I might find. There, nestled among her makeup and keys, was a plane ticket to New York, dated for tomorrow. My world tilted on its axis. The perfume, the secretive calls, the lie about seeing Ethan at the airport. It all made terrible sense now. As I stood there, holding the evidence of my husband's betrayal and my sister's deception, I felt something inside me harden. The old Laura, trusting and naive, died in that moment. In her place rose a woman who would no longer be fooled, no longer be played for a fool. Tomorrow, I decided, there would be a reckoning, and neither Ethan nor Rachel would see it coming. I stood in the kitchen, my hands gripping the counter so tightly my knuckles turned white. The sound of Rachel's suitcase wheel rolling across the hardwood floor echoed through the apartment. "Laura?" she called out. "I'm heading out for a bit. Don't wait up." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. It was now or never. "Going somewhere special, Rachel?" I asked, stepping into the hallway. She froze, her hand on the doorknob. "Oh, just meeting a friend." I held up the plane ticket I'd found in her purse. "A friend in New York, perhaps?" The color drained from Rachel's face. "Laura, I can explain." "Save it," I snapped. "I know you're going to see Ethan. How long has this been going on?" Rachel's demeanor changed in an instant. The guilt vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating look. "Longer than you'd like to know, sis," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Ethan and I, we have something special. Something you could never give him." The words hit me like a physical blow. "How could you do this to me? I'm your sister." She laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Oh, please, you've always had everything handed to you on a silver platter. The perfect job, the perfect husband. It's time I got what I deserved." "By stealing my husband?" I was shaking now, rage and hurt battling for dominance. "He was never really yours," Rachel sneered. "He was just waiting for something better to come along. Face it, Laura, you're not enough for him. You never were." I lunged forward, my hand connecting with her cheek in a resounding slap. Rachel stumbled back, shock written across her face. "Get out," I hissed. "Get out of my home, and don't you dare come back." Rachel grabbed her suitcase, her eyes blazing with fury. "You'll regret this, Laura. Ethan and I will make sure of it. As the door slammed behind her, I collapsed to the floor, sobs racking my body. How had everything fallen apart so quickly? Hours later, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. Laura? His voice was cold, controlled. We need to talk. About what? I asked, my own voice hollow. About how you've been sleeping with my sister. There was a pause. Rachel told me what happened. You had no right to attack her like that. I laughed bitterly. No right. She's been having an affair with my husband. And I had no right. It's not an affair, Ethan said firmly. Laura, I'm in love with Rachel. I want a divorce. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. A divorce? I whispered. Yes, I'll be back in town next week. We can discuss the details then. Details, I echoed, feeling numb. Ethan, wait. But the line had already gone dead. I sat in stunned silence, my mind reeling. My marriage was over. My husband, the man I'd loved and trusted, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. And my own sister had been complicit in it all. As the shock began to wear off, a new emotion took its place. Determination. I wouldn't let them see me broken. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. I stood up, wiping away the last of my tears. If Ethan wanted a divorce, he'd get one, but it would be on my terms. I picked up my phone again, scrolling through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Sarah Goldstein, the best divorce attorney in the city. Sarah? I said when she answered. It's Laura. I need your help. My husband's been having an affair with my sister, and he wants a divorce. Oh, honey. Sarah's voice was sympathetic but steely. Don't you worry. We'll make sure you come out of this on top. As I hung up, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The life I'd known was over, shattered by betrayal and lies. But from the ashes of my old life, a new Laura would rise. And this Laura, she wouldn't be anyone's victim. Not anymore. The morning sickness hit me like a freight train. I barely made it to the bathroom before emptying the contents of my stomach. As I slumped against the cool tile floor, reality crashed down on me. I was pregnant. With shaking hands, I reached for my phone and dialed my doctor's office. An hour later, my suspicions were confirmed. 6 weeks along, my mind reeled. A baby. Ethan's baby. I stumbled out of the clinic in a daze, my thoughts a chaotic whirlwind. How could I bring a child into this mess? Ethan was in love with Rachel. Our marriage was falling apart. And now this. My phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Finalizing details in New York. Back next week. We need to talk. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the reply button. Should I tell him? Did he deserve to know? The thought of Ethan and Rachel raising my child made me physically ill. No, this was my decision to make. My body, my choice. I made my way to the office, trying to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting. By lunchtime, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to talk to someone. Someone who would understand. I found myself outside Grace and Arnold's house, Ethan's parents. They had always been kind to me, treating me like a daughter. Before I could change my mind, I knocked. Grace answered, her face lighting up. Laura, what a lovely surprise. Come in, dear. I followed her into the living room where Arnold was reading the paper. He smiled warmly at me. Laura, it's been too long. How are you? The concern in their eyes undid me. Tears welled up, and before I knew it, I was sobbing, the whole sordid story spilling out. Ethan's affair with Rachel, the impending divorce, and finally the pregnancy. Grace held me close, murmuring soothing words while Arnold's face darkened with anger. That boy, he muttered. We didn't raise him to behave like this. When I finally calmed down, Grace asked the question I'd been dreading. What are you going to do about the baby, dear? I took a deep breath. I don't know. I never thought I'd be in this position. Single, pregnant, about to go through a divorce. Arnold leaned forward, his eyes serious. Laura, whatever you decide, we want you to know that we're here for you. Your family, regardless of what happens with Ethan. Grace nodded emphatically. We'll support you, no matter what. If you want to keep the baby, we'll help in any way we can. Their unconditional support overwhelmed me. For the first time since discovering Ethan's betrayal, I felt a glimmer of hope. As I left their house, my phone buzzed again. Another text from Ethan. Booked an appointment with the divorce lawyer for next Tuesday. Hope that works for you. A cold fury washed over me. He was already moving on, planning our divorce like it was just another business meeting. And here I was, carrying his child. My world turned upside down. In that moment, I made my decision. I would keep this baby. I would build a new life for us, without Ethan, without Rachel, without their toxicity and betrayal. I typed out a reply. Tuesday works. I'll be there with my lawyer. Then I made another call. Sarah? It's Laura again. There's been a development. I'm pregnant, and I'm keeping the baby. Sarah's intake of breath was audible. Oh, honey, this changes everything. Don't worry, we'll make sure you and that baby are taken care of. Ethan won't know what hit him. As I hung up, a strange calm settled over me. The path ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges I couldn't even imagine, but for the first time in weeks, I felt strong. Ready. Let Ethan and Rachel have each other. I had something far more precious now. A future. A family of my own. I placed a hand on my still flat stomach. It's just you and me, little one, I whispered. And we're going to be just fine. The day of the divorce meeting arrived with a sickening sense of finality. I stood outside the law office, my hand resting protectively over my still flat stomach. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the door. Ethan was already there, looking annoyingly handsome in his tailored suit. His eyes widened slightly as they met mine, a flicker of something, guilt, regret, passing over his face before it hardened into a mask of indifference. Laura, he nodded curtly. Ethan, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. We sat across from each other, an ocean of betrayal between us. Our lawyers began discussing terms, their voices a dull buzz in my ears. I focused on Ethan, studying the man I once thought I'd spend my life with. How had we ended up here? Suddenly the door burst open. Rachel sauntered in, her face a picture of faux concern. Oh, I'm so sorry I'm late, she cooed, placing a possessive hand on Ethan's shoulder. Traffic was terrible. I felt the blood drain from my face. What is she doing here? I demanded, my voice shaking with fury. Ethan at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. Rachel's here for moral support, he muttered. Moral support? I laughed bitterly. That's rich, coming from the two people who have the least morals in this room. Rachel's eyes narrowed. Now, Laura, there's no need to be nasty. We're all adults here. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. I want her out, I said, pointing at Rachel. This is between Ethan and me. She has no right to be here. Actually, Ethan cleared his throat. There's something you should know. He glanced at Rachel, who nodded encouragingly. Rachel and we're engaged. The world tilted on its axis. Engaged. The word echoed in my head, each repetition a fresh stab of pain. How long? I whispered, my voice barely audible. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. We've been talking about it for a while. I was going to tell you after. How long? I repeated, each word dripping with venom. Rachel smirked, flashing a diamond ring I hadn't noticed before. Since last month. We didn't want to upset you, but we're just so in love. Something inside me snapped. All the pain, the betrayal, the fear of the past weeks coalesced into a white-hot rage. In love? I spat. You want to talk about love? Let me tell you something about love. I turned to Ethan, my eyes blazing. I'm pregnant. The room fell silent. Ethan's face drained of color. Rachel's smug smile faltered. What? Ethan choked out. You heard me, I said, my voice gaining strength. I'm carrying your child. The child you were ready to abandon along with your marriage vows. Ethan stumbled to his feet. Laura, I had no idea. Why didn't you tell me? When should I have told you, Ethan? When you were sneaking around with my sister. Or maybe when you were planning your engagement behind my back. Rachel's face contorted with fury. You're lying, she hissed. You're just trying to manipulate him. I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Manipulate him? That's your area of expertise, Rachel, not mine. I turned back to Ethan, who looked shell-shocked. I don't want anything from you, I said, my voice cold. Not your money, not your time, nothing. This child and I will be just fine without you. With that, I gathered my things and walked towards the door. As I reached for the handle, Ethan called out. Laura, wait. We need to talk about this. It's my baby, too. I paused, my hand on the doorknob. Without turning around, I said, You lost the right to call it your baby when you chose her over us. As I walked out, leaving behind a stunned Ethan and a seething Rachel, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges I couldn't even imagine. But for the first time in months, I felt truly free. My hand moved to my stomach, a small smile playing on my lips. It's just you and me now, little one, I whispered, and we're going to be amazing. The months flew by in a whirlwind of doctor's appointments, legal meetings, and sleepless nights. My belly grew along with my determination to build a new life for myself and my baby. Ethan's attempts to reach out were met with silence. I had nothing left to say to him. As I neared my due date, I received an unexpected visitor. Grace, Ethan's mother, stood on my doorstep, her eyes brimming with tears. "Laura, dear," she said, pulling me into a gentle hug, "I hope you don't mind me dropping by. I needed to see you." I ushered her in, my heart heavy. Grace and Arnold had been nothing but supportive throughout this ordeal, but I knew their loyalty was torn between their son and me. "How are you feeling?" Grace asked, her eyes fixed on my swollen belly. "Tired," I admitted, "but ready." Grace nodded, her expression pained. "Laura, there's something you should know. Ethan and Rachel, they're planning to fight for custody." The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. "What?" I gasped, steadying myself against the wall. "They claim you're unfit to be a single mother," Grace continued, her voice trembling with anger. "They're saying your work is too demanding, that you won't have time for the baby." Rage coursed through me, hot and fierce. "How dare they?" I seethed. "After everything they've done, they think they have the right to take my child?" Grace reached out, squeezing my hand. "Arnold and I won't let that happen. We'll testify on your behalf if it comes to that." Tears pricked my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered. As Grace left, I felt a sharp pain in my abdomen. I dismissed it, too preoccupied with this new threat. But as the evening wore on, the pain intensified. With a jolt of realization, I knew the baby was coming. I called my friend Sarah, who rushed over to drive me to the hospital. As we sped through the night, another contraction hit, stronger this time. "Breathe, Laura," Sarah urged, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. We arrived at the hospital in a flurry of activity. As I was wheeled into the delivery room, I caught sight of a familiar figure in the waiting area. Ethan. Our eyes met for a brief moment. I saw a mixture of emotions flash across his face: concern, regret, longing. But then Rachel appeared at his side, and his expression hardened. The next few hours were a blur of pain and determination. With each contraction, I channeled my anger, my fear, my love for this child I hadn't met yet. And then finally, a cry pierced the air. "It's a boy," the doctor announced, placing my son on my chest. As I looked into his tiny face, all the pain and betrayal of the past months melted away. This was what mattered, this perfect, innocent life we had created. But my moment of bliss was short-lived. A commotion outside the room caught my attention. Ethan's voice, raised in anger. "That's my son in there! I have a right to see him!" Panic gripped me. I clutched my baby closer, my heart racing. The nurse looked at me questioningly. "Do you want to see the father?" she asked gently. I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. "No," I whispered. "He's not welcome here." As if sensing my distress, my son began to cry. I soothed him, murmuring soft words of comfort. In that moment, I made a vow. No matter what it took, I would protect this child. From Ethan, from Rachel, from anyone who threatened our happiness. The nurse nodded understanding and left to deal with Ethan. As his protests faded, I looked down at my son, marveling at his tiny features. "It's just you and me now, little one," I whispered, echoing the words I'd spoken months ago. "And I promise you, we're going to be more than just fine. We're going to be extraordinary." 3 years flew by in a blur of first steps, sleepless nights, and countless moments of joy with my son Alex. I'd built a life for us, far from the shadows of Ethan and Rachel's betrayal. My design business thrived, and I'd even started dating again, though Alex remained my priority. Then, on a crisp autumn morning, my phone rang. Ethan's name flashed on the screen. My heart raced as I answered. "Laura." His voice was cold, accusatory. "What have you done to my parents?" I blinked, caught off guard. "Ethan, what are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb," he snarled. "Mom and Dad are broke. They're saying you're the reason why. What kind of sick game are you playing?" My mind reeled. I hadn't spoken to Grace and Arnold in months, not since they'd moved to Florida for retirement. "I haven't seen your parents in ages, Ethan. I have no idea what you're talking about." "Liar." Ethan's voice rose to a shout. "They've been sending you money for years, and now they can't even afford their medications. How could you do this to them? To Alex?" Anger surged through me. "Listen to me, Ethan. I don't know what's going on with your parents, but I have nothing to do with it. Maybe you should look closer to home for answers." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Ethan spoke again, his voice was low and menacing. I'm warning you, Laura. If I find out you've been manipulating my parents, I'll take Alex away from you. You won't get away with this. The line went dead. I stood there, shaking, my mind racing. What was happening? I dialed Grace's number, but it went straight to voicemail. Arnold's, too. Panic rising, I called their neighbor in Florida. Oh, honey, the neighbor said, her voice heavy with sympathy. Grace and Arnold moved out weeks ago, said they couldn't afford the place anymore. I thought you knew. My blood ran cold. Something was terribly wrong. Just then there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find a stern-faced woman in a suit. Laura Thompson, she asked. I nodded, numb. I'm from Child Protective Services. We've received a report of potential child endangerment. I'm here to conduct an evaluation. My world tilted on its axis. Child endangerment? I echoed, disbelieving. There must be some mistake. The woman's face remained impassive. May I come in, please? As she entered, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. How does it feel to lose everything, sis? Karma's a bitch. Our Rachel. Of course. This was her doing. The CPS worker moved through my home, asking pointed questions about my parenting, my work hours, my financial situation. With each query, I felt the noose tightening. Where's your son now? She asked. At daycare, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, making a note. I'll need to speak with the daycare staff, and we'll be conducting follow-up visits. In the meantime, I strongly advise against any travel with your son. As she left, I collapsed onto the couch, my mind a whirlwind of fear and fury. Ethan and Rachel had orchestrated this, I was sure of it. They were trying to take Alex from me. My phone rang again. Grace's number. Laura? Her voice was weak, trembling. I'm so sorry. We didn't know what else to do. Rachel said if we didn't help them, we'd never see Alex again. But now they've taken everything. Tears streamed down my face as the full picture emerged. Ethan and Rachel had manipulated everyone, destroying lives in their wake. As I hung up, a steely resolve settled over me. They thought they'd won, that they'd finally broken me. But they had no idea what I was capable of when it came to protecting my son. I picked up my phone again, dialing a number I'd hoped never to use. Sarah? It's Laura. I need your help. It's time to fight back. The morning sun had barely risen when I heard the commotion outside my office. Ethan's voice, loud and belligerent, echoed through the hallway. Where is she? I demand to see Laura. My heart raced as I quickly dialed security. But before they could arrive, my office door burst open. Ethan stormed in, his face contorted with rage. Rachel closed behind him. You think you can hide from us? Ethan snarled. We know what you did to my parents. You're not fit to raise Alex. I stood my ground, anger and determination surging through me. I've done nothing to your parents, Ethan. You and Rachel are the ones who've manipulated and stolen from them. Rachel's face twisted into a sneer. Prove it. It's your word against ours. Who do you think they'll believe? The loving son or the bitter ex-wife? Just then, Sarah burst into the room, followed by 2 police officers. Actually, she said, her voice steady, they'll believe the evidence. Ethan and Rachel's faces paled as Sarah produced a stack of documents. We have bank records showing large transfers from Grace and Arnold's accounts to yours, Ethan. And Rachel, we have recordings of you threatening them if they didn't comply. The officers stepped forward. Ethan Thompson, Rachel Thompson, you're under arrest for fraud and extortion. As they were led away in handcuffs, Ethan's mask of arrogance crumbled. Laura, he pleaded, you can't let them do this. Think of Alex. I met his gaze, my voice firm. I am thinking of Alex, that's why I'm doing this. Once they were gone, I collapsed into my chair, overwhelmed by the emotions coursing through me. Sarah placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. It's over, Laura, you did it. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Later that day, I stood outside Alex's daycare, my heart in my throat. The staff had been briefed about the situation, but I was still terrified of what might happen. As I waited, a familiar car pulled up. Grace and Arnold stepped out, looking older and more frail than I remembered. Laura, Grace's voice quavered as she approached. We're so sorry, for everything. I pulled them both into a hug, tears streaming down my face. It's okay, I whispered. You're safe now. The daycare doors opened, and Alex came bounding out. Mommy, he cried, throwing himself into my arms. I held him tight, savoring his warmth, his innocence. Hey, buddy, there's some people I want you to meet. I turned to Grace and Arnold, who were watching with tear-filled eyes. Alex, these are your grandparents. They've been away for a while, but they're here now. As Alex shyly said hello, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. We had a long road ahead of us, rebuilding trust and healing old wounds. But for the first time in years, I felt hope. That night, as I tucked Alex into bed, he asked a question that broke my heart. "Mommy, why did Daddy and Aunt Rachel go away?" I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes, honey, people make bad choices, but that doesn't mean they don't love you. It just means they need to learn how to love better. Alex nodded, his little face serious. "Will I see them again?" "Maybe someday," I said, kissing his forehead. "But for now, we have each other, and Grandma and Grandpa, and that's more than enough." As I closed his bedroom door, I caught sight of myself in the hallway mirror. The woman staring back at me was stronger, wiser, and more resilient than I ever thought possible. I had weathered the storm of betrayal, fought for my child, and come out the other side. Not unscathed, but unbroken. Tomorrow, we would start the process of relocating, finding a new home where we could build a peaceful life away from the shadows of the past. It wouldn't be easy, but I was ready for the challenge. Because now I knew the truth. I was capable of facing anything life threw at me. And with Alex by my side, I had all the love and strength I needed to face whatever came next. As I settled into bed, I smiled to myself. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I was excited to see what it held. Because whatever came our way, I knew we would face it together, and that was all that mattered.
At first glance, being allowed an allowance without even having to lift a finger on the household work may sound like a dream come true. But living in the same house as my mother-in-law Doris can always get a little bit difficult. All of this is occasionally offset as a 34-year-old web designer by Doris' rehearsed sarcasm. My husband Bobby and I have faced many hardships due to us, basically being polar halves of each other when it comes to work ethic around the home. After marrying, I began freelancing, which my previous employer and myself both thought was a good idea. In return, this has served me well by giving me a regular stream of work from the known people, while saving hundreds of hours on daily commuting and plenty more to put into my household chore. In contrast, Doris continues to hold conservative ideas about the division of labor within marriage. A wife should be a homemaker who dedicates herself first and foremost to her family. It returns regularly, this belief she has in herself, you better believe it, that refuses to even begin absorbing the reality of contemporary spousal partnerships. Doris views my freelance work as small potatoes, not contributing in any meaningful way to our home's bottom line. In between my web design work, I do what little household chores are needed around the house too to make it fair and fun, but Doris is unswayed. Her frustration comes from contrasting the way in which I currently balance work and home with her definition of what is more conventional. She probably sees me as some interloper who rained on her family parade, especially since she has grown more reliant upon Bobby after his dad passed away 4 years ago. The family remains under the roof of my mother's son, and now entirely owned by her after his death to a life insurance settlement. Guest post by Randy Aita. Yes, Menfort said, if you follow along in this household during a typical day, what tends to be highlighted are the differing ways of living, and being that so clearly mark an era alien from one another, get together navigating societal norms with each taking turns at the lead. Our small home is efficiently set up for our little family, making a perfect workspace. Though there is sometimes discord amid the beauty, not everyone appreciates live music. It's also a natural meeting spot for my mother-in-law Doris's friends who've lived in this apartment complex close to 30 years. But the arrival of these old friends had always changed our house, and I often found myself morphing into a hostess, serving coffee with sweets during their visits. Ritually, the gaggle of women will discuss their problems over their daughter-in-laws. Amongst all this, there are moments when I begin to chuckle as they describe their grievances. For instance, they talk about one daughter-in-law who frequently retreats to her parents' home over minor disagreements, spending almost half the year away. They label her as financially reckless, lamenting how this behavior leaves their sons bewildered and has even resulted in debt collectors showing up at their doors. These discussions, which often unfold near my workspace, sometimes take a humorous twist. It's almost as if Doris's friends are in an informal competition to see who has the most troublesome daughter-in-law. Compliments about daughters-in-law are rare in these sessions. However, on the rare occasion that one is praised for managing the household efficiently while working, Doris's reaction is notably sour. She dismisses such efforts with a wave of her hand, reducing my work to merely a side job, even as the room fills with laughter. This blend of humor and critique during these gatherings provides a unique insight into the generational differences in expectations and values regarding family roles, highlighting the ongoing challenges of blending traditional expectations with modern family dynamics. Amid the lively discussions and laughter that fill our living room when my mother-in-law Doris hosts her friends, my job often becomes a topic of scrutiny. Doris loudly questions the value of my work, openly wondering about my earnings. This prompts a shift in the conversation to the spending habits of daughters-in-law, highlighting a sharp contrast between their spending and the traditional belief that a husband's income should primarily support the family. The room bursts into laughter, finding humor in the seemingly outdated notion of such expectations. During these moments, I sometimes find myself overwhelmed by the repetitive stories and the dated views expressed. To cope, I slip on my headphones and focus on my work, trying to ignore the undercurrent of belittlement that seems to target the modern-day daughter-in-law, including myself. One evening at a family dinner, when my husband Bobby suggested purchasing a new car, Doris immediately questioned why he needed my approval for such decisions. Despite Bobby's efforts to explain that we make significant decisions together as a family, Doris insisted that since he was the one with a driver's license, he should have the autonomy to choose any car he likes. Caught in this familial tug-of-war, I tactfully deferred the decision back to him, highlighting the complex dynamics at play where Bobby consistently seeks input from both me and his mother before making major choices. This incident underscored an ongoing dynamic in our family. Raised by parents who valued individual decision-making, Bobby believes in avoiding selfish actions. Conversely, Doris, influenced by the more patriarchal behavior of her late husband, clings to the idea that such independence in decision-making is normal. Whenever Bobby seeks my opinion, it inadvertently stirs Doris's irritation, leading her to accuse me of being overly strict. This recurrent theme in our interaction showcases the tension between traditional and contemporary values in our family life, emphasizing the challenges we face in balancing respect for the past with the realities of present-day partnerships. Struggling to find words in response to the critical remarks often made by my mother-in-law, I've realized it's true that I tend to express my concerns rather than make unilateral decisions. To my dismay, during a recent argument, my husband sided with his mother, blaming my vocal nature for his habit of consulting me before taking any action. Several months into our marriage, it became clear that he rarely stood up for me in front of his mother, and even when we were alone, his apologies and assurances that he prioritized our relationship started to ring hollow. This realization deepened with the incident involving the selection of a new car, which cast a long shadow over our relationship. Initially considerate, my husband ultimately failed to support me in front of his mother, raising serious doubts about our future together. I found myself wishing he would not confuse his indecisiveness for kindness, and hoping that Doris would be more straightforward in her communications. A month later, my husband's new car arrived. The excitement was tangible, and he and Doris were thrilled, inviting me for a celebratory drive. However, the mood quickly soured when the cost of the car, a staggering $300,000, was revealed. I confronted my husband about the financial implications of such an extravagant purchase, only to be met with dismissive responses and suggestions to just take out a loan. Doris jumped to his defense, chiding me for questioning the expense since I had, according to her, given him the freedom to make his own choice. Frustrated, I questioned how we could afford such a luxury. But Doris sharply retorted, "It's not like you pay, so you have no right to complain," feeling utterly unheard and marginalized in discussions that directly affected our shared life. I was left feeling isolated within my own home, pondering how to navigate a relationship where my input seemed undervalued and where financial decisions were made with such apparent disregard for joint consultation and responsibility. As I tried to assert that I contribute significantly to our family income through my work, my mother-in-law's reaction was unusually harsh. She dismissed the legitimacy of my earnings, scoffing at what she called my little side job, and insisting it couldn't compare to my husband's substantial salary of over $130,000 a year. Her contempt was palpable, and just as I was about to argue that my income was indeed supportive, I realized my husband had silently withdrawn from the confrontation. Having endured such treatment for too long, I reached my breaking point when my mother-in-law sharply told me, "A daughter-in-law like you should just get out." Her words echoed in my mind, not just as an insult, but as a dismissal of all I had put up with. Angered by her words and deeply disappointed by my husband's indifference, I blamed him for our escalating dispute, attributing it to his chronic indecisiveness. Fed up, I firmly stated, "Understood. Then I will leave." I went to my workspace to gather my computer and essentials. As I was leaving the house, I informed my mother-in-law that I would return later for the rest of my belongings. Her angry gaze bore into me while my husband remained conspicuously absent, hiding in his room. As I crossed the threshold, my mother-in-law's voice rang out, "When you step into this house again, it will be after signing the divorce papers." I walked away without responding, stunned by her abrasive words, something I had never experienced before. I sought refuge at my parents' home. Shaken and unsure, when my mother saw me, she immediately sensed something was wrong and asked what had happened. Struggling to articulate the full extent of the events, I shared my regrets and expressed how much my husband had changed from the man who once deeply cherished me. Discussing the situation with my parents brought some relief, and with no children complicating the scenario, my mother suggested I consider divorce sooner rather than later, especially given my financial independence. Over the weekend, with the support of my father, I began to take the necessary steps towards a new beginning. Contemplating a future that, though uncertain, promised peace and self-respect, I collected my belongings and moved out of the house I had shared with my husband and his mother. They both seemed to avoid the final confrontation. Standing outside my husband's room, I spoke softly, "You took care of me for a long, long time. Can you sign the divorce papers?" I slipped the documents under the door and soon heard his indifferent response. I signed it. "We're done here." Retrieving the signed papers felt like a hollow victory, marking the end of our marriage. I left without a word to my mother-in-law, carrying with me a deep sense of sadness. After 3 years in that house, which held only a handful of happy memories, I decided it was time to move on. I went straight to the city office to submit the divorce papers, hoping that this formal separation on paper would help simplify the end of this chapter in my life. The plan was to temporarily move back to my parents' house and continue my work from there. As I started rebuilding my life independently, my mother suggested I stay with them for a while. It would be less worrying than living alone, she said. My father also expressed his concerns, cautioning that Bobby and his mother might unpredictably decide to visit me. Although I initially thought such scenarios were unlikely, living at my parents' home proved to be comforting. Fortunately, my job's flexibility allowed me to work remotely, which made the decision to extend my stay an easy one. 3 months passed, and just as Bobby and his mother began to fade into distant memories, an unknown number appeared on my phone. Initially hesitant, I wondered if it might be a mistake or an unwanted connection to my past. Trying to reach out after several persistent calls, I finally answered, only to hear my ex-husband's frantic voice on the other end. "Why do you answer the phone?" he asked, sounding perplexed. Prepared to end the conversation swiftly, I replied that since there was no reason for us to communicate further, I was going to hang up. However, his next question caught me off guard. "Wait a minute, why isn't my smartphone working?" he inquired. With little interest, I suggested that he should contact the mobile phone company. But then a thought struck me. I asked him if he had been making regular deposits into the bank account we used to share. Previously, we both contributed to this joint account. My steady salary along with the more variable income from his job selling health products, which was often insufficient due to its performance-based nature. Normally, I topped up the account at the end of each month, but for the last 4 months, only his contributions had been made. It dawned on me that I had left in the middle of the month, and the new car's loan payments might have commenced. My ex-husband fell silent upon this realization. Over the phone, I stated calmly, "I've been managing our household expenses with my income until now. From this point forward, please take care of your living expenses." Internally, I felt the urge to tell him, "You reap what you sow," but I chose to hold back and quietly ended the call. Reflecting on the situation, it occurred to me that my ex-husband had never fully disclosed his actual earnings to his mother. She seemed unaware that our household had been largely supported by my salary post-marriage. Perhaps he was too embarrassed to admit that his wife was the primary earner, despite it being a well-known fact. Basic utilities like electricity and water aren't usually disrupted so easily. This lack of transparency and his avoidance of responsibility highlighted the broader issues that had plagued our relationship. It became clear that mobile phone service was the first luxury to be compromised. One holiday morning, the house intercom buzzed insistently, signaling an issue at the door. My father responded sternly to the visitor, "We don't want to be involved with you anymore. Please leave." Sensing the gravity of the situation, I hurried to the entrance alongside my mother. Through the intercom, we heard the familiar voice of my former mother-in-law pleading for a moment to talk. As I faced her, just as my father had predicted, anger was evident on her face. She immediately launched into accusations upon seeing me, blaming me for not making the usual monthly deposits, which she claimed resulted in the utilities being cut off. We were all taken aback by this accusation, unsure of her meaning. My ex-husband tried to step in, saying, "Mom, stop it. Doris is no longer involved with us." But his mother brushed off his attempt to calm her and continued her tirade. "Bobby earns $7,500. How can this happen?" she exclaimed. I responded quietly, correcting her that $7,500 was my income, not Bobby's. Shocked by this revelation, she turned to my ex-husband, who admitted, albeit reluctantly, that his actual take-home pay was about $7,500. My ex-mother-in-law cocked her head and gave me a stunned look. I told her that I earned it from a conventional wage, not as pocket money. After that, she turned to Bobby and he told her around $7,500. After a period of shocked pause, she startled the hell out of me by suddenly asking, "Doris, how would you like to return near us?" She had threatened to have me removed from the property, and it was near absurd that she would then request I come back. And I replied with a solid no, and said we would not be reconciling. It was an important conversation in which our misinterpretations and money misconceptions had snapped the ties of friendship. I said very clearly, we have been separated for years now, so I do not care. Despite this emphatic no, my ex-mother-in-law insisted that the only way to work things out was with me and Bobby getting back together. And after they dawdled a moment longer, in Spanish so as to not alert me of their intent, my father barked at them and ordered that they leave straight away or else he would call the police. They practically ran out in total fright, as my father firmly said never to return back to our home. Thinking back to the meeting, my mother was obviously irate with him, and so was my dad. Wish he wasn't more than she did. I was relieved that we had distanced ourselves from such arseholes. Years later, I stumbled upon word that an aging mutual friend of my ex-husband had experienced some tough times as a fugitive. He had lost his parents' house, with the land they owned, and moved into a modest flat together with her mom. The new and rarely used car was liquidated, and the revenue directed to pay off the other portion of that loan. Still, having paid off his arrears, Chuck once more demonstrated financial carelessness by gambling away his remaining cash. He ultimately disappeared without a trace. My ex had just put his mother in a home due to diagnosed dementia. The good news is I have a successful career and am living on my own. I have recently started dating a colleague who is well aware of my divorce. He is hardworking, not financially dependent on me, or blowing every last cent he makes, the polar opposite to my ex-husband. Now he and I have never talked about marriage, but I feel really secure in this relationship, convinced that if not now, then someday soon the potential is great. Robert felt like he was being conned. She blurted a nasty demand for $85,000 in gift form, showing her hand and becoming raw emotion from Sarah. Returning home with such unmitigated gall, months after absolutely shattering my life by running away with my fiancé, was enough reason for me not to forgive her immediately, even if she is bearing new fruit. My father, as did I with the migrants at Our Lady of Perpetual Challenges, a story for another time, told her to get out in that deep voice of his, pointing out she was mistaken if expecting a welcome mat laid, out 11th hour, and all of a sudden seemingly traumatic home birth plan. As aggressive as Sarah could be, she did not come with the realization that when she returned no one would welcome her home, and neither was gone as well. My name is Caroline Judy. I am 28 and soon to be Dennis. A year before my wedding, a group of those friends had heaved an audible sigh. Thank God, girl. It was starting to be B&I Hannah up in this camp. Put me at a social event they can support, even though I thought it was none of their business. Because of the way I look, there are things that have always been sure when it comes to physical attributes. I had room for doubt in me since childhood that anyone could ever find me attractive. At that meeting, I met Dennis, fateful. The king of red cups, Dennis walked right up to little old me. Even his simple greetings had my heart racing. He appreciated the accompanying elbow grease and made my bookish, less exuberant history seem worthwhile. I was calm, whereas Dennis is high maintenance. Guess what was so shocking about that? He became my first official boyfriend. Life became enjoyable and fun, with simple things now, including shared joy in movies and dinners, etc. 1 year later, he proposed, and we started to plan our wedding. The relationship flourished, even with his friendly demeanor and dashing good looks that I had felt were entirely too beyond me. When I introduced Dennis to my parents, My mother squealed in delight, not at the sight of her only son having apparently found happiness with a nice young man. Rather, she asked, once Deanne was out of earshot, why on earth could he ever fancy someone so ugly? It was embarrassing how surprised she had been that I could get a guy as handsome as Dennis to like me. To which she retorted, quite naturally now you can even jocular type. But it perturbed my father and simply told her to never say things like that. One of those being that my mother once insulted me about my appearance, her home remedies and suggestions on which parts she thought needed fixing through plastic surgery zapped on the confidence I have in myself. Sarah, my older sister, who is beautiful besides, has been the family's admiration, and any small compliment that was ever paid to me paled in comparison. Throughout the marriage introduction, I was praying for true support from my family. But instead, what I kept getting eventually were unnecessary words of undermining both time and again. And Sarah waltzed in and changed everything. Dennis was smitten by her beauty and charm. Their crowding out of Sarah and my journey home with Dennis's endless accolades tossed me to the side. Sarah's unrepentant and pregnant reappearance, along with her inconvenient request of a grand gift, breaks the intricate balance in family relations. Unfortunately, such a cavalier avoidance of the fallout from her actions illuminates how challenging it is to forgive and be forgiven by other members in your clan when you have broken faith with them. Through all this struggle, my journey to self-acceptance and love, in the midst of insecurities and others defining me, has paved a path that continues to defy the odds even after nearly 2 years later. But throughout the book, there is no question that Dennis admired Carolyn's family, even when he was mildly shocked at finding out her father had saved $85,000 for their wedding. He was far too excited to care that they were, in their own way, beautiful people who had been nothing but kind and generous towards him. And besides, how great would it be? A beautiful sister or a dad with things. Carolyn liked his light-hearted manner, which was a good counterpoint to her own worrying ways. But what a difference another week made for Dennis. He said it casually, and with the lack of muscle, you might hear someone talking about a slight chance for rain. Let's just call this off. Carolyn was all smiles from confusion, at first not understanding the weight of his words. There were no soft feelings on Dennis's side. He told her out of the blue that he'd never really loved until loving Becky, and then left as abruptly as she had come into his life. He confessed to fantasizing about the perks of being with Carolyn, but shirked from having an eternity shackled platonically to someone he felt no physical affection towards, which is why he chose Sarah instead. Carolyn went from already having no self-esteem to hearing the nail in her coffin, aka Richard. The 12 turning 13-year-old Sarah, who was ecstatic to be engaged to Dennis, and the family's aftermath, added something like salt into a wound. As if it did, Sarah's mother hosted a lavish feast in celebration of her daughter and future son-in-law getting married, all the while blind to Carolyn's hurt. Her father, though, was visibly shocked and disappointed, his movements betraying a kind of sorrow that seemed new to the both of them. With Sarah cruelly taunting their father, the family situation broke completely and ended in such ugly confrontation, where he drove her mother away calling after them that he could no longer bear to witness more of his very own blood being abused by daughter. At the time, Carolyn's father was too emotional to properly respond, but after he got calmer apologized and alluded that there is a much deeper truth. Carolyn, Dennis, and Sarah, this is a look at how betrayal and family patterns can obscure who we are when caught in the trauma created by loved ones. Featuring a sister who takes full advantage of Carolyn's heartache and embarrassment, the novel delves into how we can grow from finding compassion in some seriously devastating life scenarios. I searched for power and approval, assured it was a good thing that everything crumbled before the first step down to my husband. If a man like Dennis could betray me the way he had, I figured that was just one tick of infidelity down, and many more to go. I tried to be brave, but my tears came anyway. My dad reassured me of his love, squeezing my hand tightly and giving me the moment to let it all out. Sarah and Dennis, long ago stories to be concluded, as so that their lives went on without me, were followed by a hug from him, after this painful chapter instead of the other way around. The parting was a small consolation given the emotional devastation it left in its wake. As time passed and I went farther away, the edge of this wound dulled a bit each day as my life took one small step after another towards normality. It's been a year now since all this craziness went down, and the wound of betrayal has healed with time to where I am starting to mend my relationship again with my family, particularly through his, Dad's, support. While I was visiting home, this opinion manifested in me deciding to cook pork belly for my father as a token of goodwill and time together. But then a disturbance broke our calmness. Then the door opened, and Bibi Titang Yin, Sarah and Dennis. My father echoed my shock, and his previous order for Sarah to remain away had seemingly slipped from his memory. In Sarah's voice, releasing the drama of old injuries, and telling about her application to become a mother was plainly calculated in my mom thinking March would cover September. The demand that followed the gift of $85,000 was delusional at best, and showed her intentions had not changed one bit. I did my best to keep it together as they reveled in their insensitivity and laughed at me for crying. That jaw-clenching, frustrated new response was the punishing realization of how fucking far we still have to go emotionally when those bitches laugh at me. This was the fight that I had fought. There was more than just reopening old wounds. There was my resistance in the balance. It was a clear sign, if any more were needed, that she has not altered in the slightest, and will always put material gain over real reconciliation when Sarah tried to cash in on her pregnancy. Then my father and I stood unswayed against her machination that was a step upward in the healing, an assertion of our respect when disrespected. Healing from betrayal is a long and arduous process with just as many setbacks, but it also provides chances for growth, self-expansion, and the confirmation of one's own personal truth. It was a sobering experience for me as the sting of those barbs lingered. Dennis said something derogatory about anger only making me look uglier, which was meant to hurt but served merely as a stark reminder of how shallow their assessment ever was. Criticizing me further as my dad and I stayed silent, that was Sarah revealing herself. It just wasn't a good thing to see their laughter not full of real blessings around me. Next family battle up the ante. Sarah declares she will go back for her birth, completely oblivious, as we all were, to the tectonic plate changes happening within our home's lexicography, with a casual but disingenuous-sounding inquiry as to where our mother was, revealing she was not updated on the most recent familial explosion. Sarah was surprised to learn that our mother had been told to leave, a result of her favoritism towards Sarah and the resulting conflict. One also which Sarah found it hard to appreciate, said she had suggested at the time of our parents' divorce, of which turmoil in her own life was a cause infrequently dwelt on by Cully and Kavda, that no more proofs were needed. Even after the divorce, Sarah did not lose her self-centeredness. She was looking forward to returning to a support system that did not exist, showing just how out of touch with reality she truly is in the gravity of her actions and what they have cost our family. The notion that she could have her old life back, bearing in mind the immense changes done to it, a statement of denial and selfishness. The loss of all the things that had kept our house warm with a motherly embrace turned what was already an unconventional family landscape into some tundra. The lack of preparation that Sarah had for motherhood was emphasized by her shock upon realizing she would be raising the child to whom she just gave birth. Her complaint about all the work of being a mother was at odds with her goal for glamour. Her response to facing the world of our parents being divorced, and also her part in their divorce proceedings, was instead more imposition upon my father, wanting him to do what she should have availed a lifetime. And her apology to me, despite its facade of sweet make amends, came off as hollow and half-hearted, a final plot for a bit more empathy. Although this should have always been the case, my father told Sarah that night to get lost, and I think from there it became a real turnaround. When he did not yield to her requests, he was setting a firm boundary that their relationship can no longer be about manipulation. When he declared Sarah would no longer be spoken of as his daughter, that hurt because finally it was something concrete for which she had to account, if only in her own mind. This challenging transaction, as stressful and anguished it was to experience, opened the doors of great clarity. It sent the message that respect and responsibility, as well cause and effect, are not topics to be trifled with. They burrow deep into one another's selfishness and hang on presence forever in a family. Before we could learn to progress moving forward from the shadows of our past, healing and understanding would be a long, arduous path. With a mix of horror and understanding, I saw just how distant we had become. You have no right to my care. We're not family. Strangers, my dad said, slicing open the air with his words. Sarah, in shock and feeling betrayed by how thin familial relationships can be when she then finds out a fact of our family unit that has just devastated her perception. We were not related by blood. Dad told me that Sarah had been born from our mom in another marriage of hers before they got married, and I was obviously expecting. This realization also explained the special treatment our mom gave Sarah, maybe to save her from leaving us. But Dad's love for us never faltered, solidifying my role in his heart, no matter the biology. Sarah was staggered and in shock for the first time ever, now knowing she had no biological link with her dad. The girl had always grown up believing they were related by blood, and all of it was now thrown out the window. She reacted in shock and said that she was actually relieved, in an even more twisted manner of speech, painting the father as having such bad genes to which dodging a bullet only made sense. Her plan of trying to capitalize on the situation monetarily and telling us she needs that $85,000 we would have spent for my wedding left me just saying, "I'm sorry pushing you around when your baby is not like pushing a box." Realizing he viewed her as a stranger, Dad stood steadfast in his resolve not to provide any financial support and told Mary she would need ask her mom for help. Dad was unmoved by Dennis's interjection, calling on the father to come help his son. The act was an emphatic rejection not only of Sarah, but also the duties rented by a dead marriage. Sarah's final words were emboldened with bitterness and hatred, painting Dad as the villain she had always envisioned him as. But Dad's explanation revealed a deeper manipulation. Learning that conflicts with the bio father she wanted to disappear as soon as he was replaced by our dad had led Mom into sabotaging her legal adoption of Sarah, placing a financial. Before getting closure on old issues adds a layer of complexity to whatever predicated familial dishonesty. While we were ascertaining these unpleasant truths, it allowed us to observe the complex network of relationships and intentions that had characterized our family. It drove home the notion that familial ties constructed on openness and genuine affection have greater resilience to life's blows, whereas those built on dishonesty and self-interest ultimately corrode, a series of hurt feelings left in their wake. After our parents got remarried, Mom opted to keep her maiden name. The only reason I can figure is it might have been another way for her, and the marriage itself would not be known by Sarah or anyone else on earth. So Dad said that with a tone of disgust, which sort of means either he feels very strongly about it, or there is something more than what we see on the surface. The child support money was wasted on Mom's excessive spending and did not benefit Sarah. This only served to widen the gap between Dad and Sarah. It just proved why he also thought she had no right to expect any financial support from him following their divorce. Her demands were like extortion. To Sarah, our father being not supportive was a cold shock, and she noticed the disappointment of her confidence. Dad was cold, she tried to convey with the help of a few responses from me about it. However, we were always reminded that my mother is really heartless. The unexpected arrival at Sarah's parents for her birthing cross-examined my theory. The awareness that she could not trust in reaching out to Mother, and it was very obvious. Accompanied by a simile, my mom would be here when I get home with open arms, only helped me to see how wrongly entitled one is regarding enduring support before gasping over possible abandonment. The truth of the unfolding situation shattered Sarah's belief in our mom, loving her no matter what. Her running off to elope with Dennis caused the family schism, which ultimately defined a crack deeper and broader than our parents' divorce or Mom's departure, along with much-needed money meant for Sarah. This fact of deception was made even worse by the knowledge that Sarah had been lied to twice. First about the divorce, and then regarding what happened to all of Mom's money. Confronted with the brutal reality, Sarah became frustrated and desperate for her share of our savings, a plea that I harshly delivered against. You have to ask Mom. I felt Sarah's pain as she battled to try and take it all in, her fear mounting up more when it came down to turning to Dennis for help only he was being Dutchy about everything. Dennis' limp lack of comfort or useful response to Sarah only underscored his own mercenary approach and the fundamental failure on which her long-standing dependency was based. The cry she let out when abandoned in agony became a message of hopelessness, unrecognizable against the stirrings from before for money to help her family and make peace with them. For Sarah, the altercation ended with her leaving, but for us, it was far from over. Then, like a dagger in the heart-grabber, Sarah offered to wipe us from her memory. A thing indicating profile removed a crazy act showing how torn apart she was and illustrating just how estranged we had become. As shocking as it seemed, this threat was apparently the cumulative effect of all these revelations and the emotional fallout from years of misunderstandings and manipulations within our family. One night, I was woken by a mass phone call to see that they had finally cut my daughter from the mangled wreckage hours later. Groggy, I replied without totally realizing what was going on, and suddenly there I was watching a live stream. When I saw flames brushing the mouth of our family home, my heart momentarily stopped. The potted plants ablaze, the fire, small at first, looked as though it might consume everything if fueled by a gust of wind. Dennis's face appeared, his voice ominously calm when he asked if maybe I had accidentally left something on, prompting for someone to report me, before revealing that no, it was him who set the fire with a plan apparently designed to scare out of $85K birthday funds, which will be meant as payment toward my wedding. His response was to threaten me that if I did not go and get him the money for putting out his fire, he would blackmail me with this falsehood, just as low a way of getting at money as avoiding payment. I declined, using the words "their mistake." There shouldn't have been anyone there they would not want to disturb Dad since he came out and stayed with me so that they could avoid any potential harassment. Ultimately, their plan was based on a set of false premises, which makes it more irresponsible and unjustifiable. Like we said, things went from 0 to 100 real quick. We turned to see, to our horror, my mother emerging from the burning home with them. She had been an accidental victim of their reckless stunt. No, instead Sarah's first response after the initial alarm had faded into steamy silence, was to request her money so she would not have lost anything, as Mom fell and stammered incoherent from a burn. Fortunately, emergency services arrived in time to put an end to this nightmare scenario. Arrested for arson and exposed as duplicitous buffoons, Sarah the Beard Bandit was revealed. What presumably began as a poorly executed extortion plan wound up in rescheduling fucking mutilation. From behind the bars, they woke up to find themselves facing their actions in reality. A terrible reminder of where reckless ends and criminality begins. Sarah's ensuing arrest and the baby she bore in jail resulted in her ultimately giving up that child, putting the defenseless little one into unfamiliar hands for their own good, to be kept separate from the darkness. The child would have the opportunity for a new beginning, one that could be filled with security and love through foster or adoptive parents. On the other end of that gamut, my mother's body bore physical scars. Sarah and Dennis had not sustained any wounds except to their reputation. It was a tragic moment in the demise of what had once been family, driven to destruction for, mostly wrong practices. We were fragmented and broken afterward, a family that would never be the same again for decades to come. One day she came to know that Dad was no longer selling our old family home, and the next thing, Mom started going in behind his back, trying to steal valuables. She had decided that she would come to live in this house when it appeared unoccupied. Though I remembered how beautiful my mother once was, like Sarah, she had long since stopped becoming a sympathetic figure to me. This was a woman who had betrayed both Sarah and me past the point of my being able to mourn for her, and now she again behaved in an entitled manner while illegally trespassing. Broke up with herself onto our territory, asking that my father assume all responsibility over whatever injuries ensued. Daddy vehemently denied these accusations of her and said that it was illegal for you to trespass and steal. Her defense of the situation and her now married beauty did nothing to diminish my father's position. He maintained that she deserved whatever punishment was appropriate, but not for this. Afterward, while the house did have some minor damage, it was not impossible to live in. We decided to let it go. My father took early retirement, bought a cute little house near the ocean, and I made the otherwise smart decision to move in with him so that we could both work remotely in silence. Our new eco-home had huge windows offering amazing sunsets over the ocean. More surprising were the simple pleasures found in trading city life for rural tranquility. Watching local wildlife wherever we turned, which gave most days an air of adventure. Country living had no shortage of natural encounters, but I met new people too, pushing me towards a gentle giant whose easygoing attitude made him an unlikely target. We were on a peaceful, joyful new page of life with visions to garden together, and my father's choice of wine for our evenings. The loving and kind words from Father were certainly a departure of old, but they also served as balm on some once broken flesh scars that had helped reshape how I viewed me. I fantasized about wearing a princess gown. Something that seemed so impossible was now not only possible but encouraged by my loving father. I giggled, enjoying his good-natured tease, and how our lives had changed for the better. With the nature, fresh starts, and solitude provided by rural living, we found peace in the nothingness of what to expect. Ultimately, we laughed all day long and loved in that giddy way you do when there is nothing left to lose. And for us, this translated into, other than not having much else going on externally, here I sit a damaged man. Somehow we were still engaged with one another. This wedding saw a situation develop that I could hardly credit. My in-laws, some hint of their own, had even become the object of a certain amount of underhand, baseless talk among my guests. To my shock, they then loudly burst out, "So now you're married. Now that you want to become a true member of our new family, aren't you going to have to earn the money and work with goals?" They demanded that I give them an additional $5,000 a month, dubbing what had been uttered by my father-in-law. The room grew strangely silent, and I was left speechless at their insolence, feeling my own face turn white with shock. Lucky for me, my father then came up to the microphone. His firm words made the situation a relief apart from that one anxious moment. "My name is Betty Rachel, now 33 years old. My boyfriend, we call him Stev for short, is a 35-year-old that I met through friends anxious about how long I have been single. After my mother died young, my father took on the dual role of both parents. His faith in providing for me was so real. This loss so very much hurt me that I stopped showing my feelings, and very rarely had a source close romantic relationship. Even though Stephen was the kind of person you can rely on to get things done, and take the blame if nobody else, as he is always a gentleman. Then a tree fell on me and caused me to wake up. His constant support and kindness enabled me to soften up. To make him more special, mine was my happiness when I woke up in the morning. He is a tall 35 years old, and I am 33. So when he proposed, it felt like moving from one natural stage to another. Stephen had always been a kind and thoughtful man. He was there to give me support and encouragement when I needed it most, saying, "Don't worry. Believe in me, and if something makes you feel uncomfortable, then wouldn't it be enough for me to be there with kindness till you get well? Betty, I love you. Just count upon me." It was thanks to these promises that he would give me the pleasant emotion of being happy that warmed my heart with the both enveloping, kindly radiance of his words over mine. I wanted him to have this all too. When I told my father the good news, the first thing he did was cry. "Wow, Betty, now after all these years you're finally getting married." "I'm so happy for you," he said. I teased him about being sentimental, and we had a heart-to-heart conversation, which finally revealed a deep-seated fear within him. What if I never found a husband? It was a moving moment that demonstrated how much he cared. I thanked my dad with the utmost sincerity, as a person who grew up with him alone. Now we know that their wedding will be a day taxing for both of us emotionally, probably with, given my inherent nature to weep, Stephen's even more tears. Stephen and I were too busy. In addition to steering our wedding preparations, we tried to fit every work commitment we had into our free hours, even going on a tight 3-week tour of Northeast China and being there for a business dinner every night. It was exhausting, but we kept our spirits up. There was a special moment on the horizon, meeting Stephen's parents for the first time. Having met my father not long after he proposed, Stephen arranged for me to meet his parents at last. Scheduling conflicts and all that sort of thing later, which delayed this long-awaited introduction to be sure. Anyway, a trip was planned. As we walked toward his parents' house, I felt a surge of nervousness, but Stephen was fast to comfort me. "Don't be uneasy. My parents are really good people," he said, reassuring me and helping to settle my anxieties. For this was the start of a significant new stage in our life together. When I rang the doorbell of Stephen's family home, it was his mother who answered. "Mom, I'm back," he greeted her cheerfully, receiving a warm smile in return. "Have you really come home?" "Stephen, that makes me so happy," she rejoiced. As her son amiably engaged her in friendly banter, I introduced myself courteously. "It's good to meet you. My name is Betty, and I'm Stephen's fiancée." She mildly changed her tone with me, lowering the volume from the voice that spoke with cheerfulness to Stephen and dropping her smile. "Oh, you're Betty," she noted, giving me a thorough going-over that felt closer to judgment than greeting. She then led us into the parlor, where she continued to put on airs. "Betty, I would like to know what you have to offer. Stephen is our treasure and only child. If you are to marry him, you must be a fitting wife. Are you worthy?" she demanded, her voice sharp, making the question an interrogation. I had never expected that kind of hostile, bitter feeling from my future mother-in-law and couldn't find a reply. "You will join us," she told me. "Are you ready for it?" The press questioned the tone of her words. I wasn't married into any royal or renowned family after all. Did I owe such a great commitment just because I was marrying her son? I reflected on my answer, trying to think of something to say. But she would have none of my silence and exclaimed impatiently, "When I ask you a question, answer at once. You are so ungracious." Her voice developed in intensity, demanding an immediate response. Despite feeling numbed, I mustered, "I hope that Stephen and I can assist one another through our marriage." But this was still no good. "That's a knave thing to say," she replied. "You are not just going along with one another. Taking care of Stephen is your job as a wife. In this case, his very life is dependent on you," she criticized cruelly. It was at this moment that Stephen's father, who had been quietly watching the exchange, stepped in. "Come on, dear," he said in mild remonstrance. Turning to me, he apologized. "Sorry about that, Betty. You must have been completely taken aback by what my wife just said, over, in an attempt to balance things with a stolid countenance." As I fought to keep my cool, I reminded myself that Stephen's mother was fiercely protective of him. It was very likely just her testiness speaking out of turn in that case. Just at that moment, Steve's brother came into the room. He showed no emotion on his face as he moved. The mere sight of him calmed everyone. It was a brief respite. However, this calm vanished again when he, with a disarming smile, sided with what his mother had just said. What my wife said is true. Yet most of all, what is worrying is that you are from a single-parent family, he stated. Why? I was perplexed. A single parent doesn't have a good public image. Aren't we justified in saying that she, someone with such a background, shouldn't be the wife of our only son? He said, "Hold on a minute." I interrupted, unable to let his words go unchallenged. What's wrong with being raised by one parent? My father struggled very hard to raise me by himself. I have always been very thankful for my roots and proud of my father. Just because I was raised by one parent does not make me any less valuable. They persisted in their argument. Because you were missing one parent, you couldn't have learned how to be a good wife, do housework, etc., they said. I helped my father with lots of housework anyway. And I'm also pretty good at cooking, so please don't say that. Although I rebutted firmly, Stephen's mother disregarded my words and finished. I can agree to your marrying Stephen, but you must agree in turn to give us everything because we are Stephen's parents. Can you promise that? Her request stunned me. From a position close to his mother asked aloud, "Here, since you came all the way here to request a marriage with a fine gentleman of our family, you surely know what should be done." Upon making me explain further, he cut in to make things clear that your future in-laws dominated the hours of conversation and left little room for my own point of view. I went over this conversation in my mind and came to realize the extent to which it had really bothered me that night. The evening had brought about thoughts of anxiety for our future family history, thoughts I had avoided up until now. Feeling weighed down by our recent visit to see Stephen's parents, I felt it was important to discuss my concerns with him. "Stephen, do your parents always treat guests like what I encountered today?" I queried, half hoping for some moral support. The question had no effect on Stephen's small smile. "What's that got to do with it?" he asked in confusion. Struggling to convey my meaning. "Well, the way your parents spoke to me and the words they spoke," I said. "Oh, really? They were just discussing," he answered in a way that seemed indifferent. I understood that Stephen's parents were caring for their son's future, but I thought their conduct excessive. I know your parents worry so much," I told him in mild protest, "but they really care too much." "Really? Why?" he asked. What they said was right. His voice was as if he almost sighed. "Besides, they're arranging for us to get married now, so forget it altogether." What he said made me worry about it more. He just seemed more in line with what his parents thought than with recognizing my feelings. Stephen sensed this and took me in his arms. "Betty, you have no need to worry like this." Then with his words, he seemed not completely to get my point. "The folks are a little upset, that's all. It's their only son getting married. It's going to be all right. You don't have to think about every detail. I reckon they just want us to be together, as they are." "That's why they were a bit fierce," he added. "Oh," I replied doubtfully. Stephen seemed to feel it was only fair that his parents should demand so much of him, but I couldn't help thinking this wasn't right for him to look down on me just because I'd been brought up by a single parent. I didn't think that anyone who held such views really deserved to be close partners with us. It is our wedding, and we ourselves must be the central figures. How they give or withhold their consent really has nothing to do with it. Even though I was still upset, unfortunately my head couldn't be beaten. Ruminating over his parents' opinion then seemed unavailing. Finally, I believe that one of the happiest days in life is a wedding day. Our relatives, friends, colleagues, and even bosses filled the venue. Walking down the aisle with my father, who has cared for me lovingly, I felt all kinds of emotions. Stephen and I spoke our vows and agreed to give a ring. The whole room then burst into applause. Despite hardship, this was our way, our only road, and I resolutely, yet gently, steered myself toward the world outside. When Stephen and I walked down the aisle together as a couple, the full realization that I was actually marrying him for real penetrated me, joy flooding through my entire being. As we entered the venue, the festival and video plays of our life together gave a human touch to celebration. It was indeed a memorable time, because they greeted friends who I have failed to meet for a long time, and congratulations filled the space with heartfelt joy. Although there remained some doubts in my heart about Stephen's parents, I felt so relieved, and quite honestly happy I had married him. After the ceremony, we planned to register our marriage officially. At that moment, we would live together as husband and wife. In the happiness of that day, I enjoyed every minute. But as the celebration proceeded, and it was time to begin greeting guests in earnest, an odd feeling stole over me. Stephen's parents, with us in line, looked anything but stable on their feet and had deep red faces, obvious signs that they had drunk too much. A few relatives quietly asked if they were all right. It was rather embarrassing, but we had to get on with the ceremony's ending. Just as the microphone was handed to us, Stephen's mother suddenly grabbed my hand and dragged me from Stephen. She then shouted at me with such force that all her words seemed to drop like heavy stones. "Listen here, Betty. After this wedding, you're going to be giving yourself to us in full. Get ready, because we are going to give you hell." There were sounds of conversation among the guests, and some of them laughed, thinking this was a joke. So with the situation growing worse, Stephen's father seized the microphone and scolded my dress. "Betty, how can you put on such a dress? It doesn't suit you at all, dear." Always the traditionalist, his mother readily chimed in her assent. The whispering among guests grew louder, with more shades of concern. I turned to Stephen, my eyes a mixture of disbelief and pleading, hoping that he might step in and prevent his father's impolite interruptions. This situation demanded that, even if only for me alone, he had to stand up and defend the dignity of our union. In the midst of our wedding reception, a certain moment exposed the linkages within my new family. Stephen's parents, already quite drunk, started to make demands on me. If I wanted truly to merge into their family, they said, "How can you prove belonging? After you get married, you have to give us a few thousand every month and all your bonuses." I was shocked by their greed, I heard myself saying. We interrupting parents with parents continued to lay responsibility for me that exhausted to memorize my artisan bunker hour ago. My father, seeing my predicament, grabbed the microphone back from them, and then firmly but respectfully said, "Kind of. Stop it, both of you. Do you think showing no shame, and despite his unassuming style my father, Stephen's parents still, if it would be a sense of from them, won't let up see that single parents come to nothing. He made them for just about many days. Their bold rebukes cut me deeply thief, but father was unaffected in his response. You people are something worse yet. And you did not go along with Li Cheng because he is a single father." Then he added a twist that changed the entire tone of this present exchange. "I never thought that people like you would work for President Roy. President Roy is a man with a good reputation, so I assumed his subordinates must be worthy of some respect." The reference to President Roy hit home for my father-in-law, whose company was a client of my father's, and who counted President Roy as an old friend. After all presidents out of wedlock, and how many single parents can you say something like your children were raised up? He continued then, and seeing the summit in its glory, added even higher to its pinnacle. As my father-in-law watched the horrified faces of his relatives, the room suddenly changed dynamics. No longer were they tall and confident. My father was standing up there on the platform next to the microphone, now looking small and scared. "I am sorry, sir. Please don't tell this incident to President Roy," he begged pleadingly, now collapsing at a 180-degree change on his knees from where he had previously proclaimed his loyalty to President Roy and fallen over prone on the ground like an overripe melon at just the slightest touch. This point was a turning point for me, revealing both the true nature of Stephen's family and resilience, with connections vested in my own roots. This awareness was most painful and yet needed as I considered our future in the midst of conversations among all our friends throughout the humming hall. Objection to my plan of action thus, the atmosphere was overpowered by a sense of failure expressed in Stephen's body language. Thus caught between curiosity and enjoyment, they began to record what was happening right in front of them. Father stood stoically by my side, unyielding. No matter how much you apologize, you cannot take back their words. Your father asked if I wanted to go over there with him, and without looking back I followed into the distance. I never saw it a game measures topped taking the mic from Stephen. I stood up there on stage with all my authority, a reckless renegade who had grabbed control 3 minutes previously. "Thank you for the great entertainment, but there will be no marriage." I concluded my words with resolve, fixing them first on Stephen, then his parents, and finally everybody present. "I shall also make sure to return all the gifts and contributions you made to get me here, with acknowledgement." Having made these pronouncements, I took my leave at the same time that father did. In front of me as I left, Stephen had his parents with him. They wore an expression somewhere between frightened and broken-hearted. Behind, as in every other such case, both the people he knew and people he recognized gathered round to form groups where they anxiously talked in low voices. After a few days, my decision was to return the money and gifts. I explained this to the few guests who had seen me do it, and they all took sides. The decision was courageous. They praised both my father and me for our honesty or even leadership in confronting such a difficult problem. Soon after the wedding blow spread into every corner of society, his colleagues naturally talked about the event. thereby casting he and his kin were thrown in an unfavorable light. Not only did this gossip ruin Stephen's reputation, but it also left him with no one to turn to, cast as a man without character by his own people. Only embarrassed and unable to show his face to any at work, Stephen resigned from the company. His father also felt the repercussions of the incident. When the basis of the case had been discovered through grapevine news within the company, you made a strong response. Stephen's father was demoted and transferred to a very remote branch of the company, a clear downshift that fully expressed the company's attitude on integrity and respect. As for Stephen's family, their actions at the wedding caused them to become more and more isolated from their community and extended family. Although this was all regrettable, it was of their own direct making, a clear reminder that actions do have consequences, and sometimes those results can be very hard to foresee. But in the meantime, life goes on with lessons learned. Someday Sidima shall embark upon life anew. Since the dramatic termination of my planned wedding, it is at this time that I have used to create a closer relationship with my parents. We have spent increasing quantities of quality time together, and has enhanced my feeling for everything they have done for me. From out of the blue, one day he started a deep conversation that forced me to think. "Betty, are you willing to take over my business?" he asked, with hope and a hint of earnestness mingling in his eyes. "When you was taking me in that direction, did you refer to, 'Why don't you aim high and become president of my company?'" The suggestion was a step forward that seemed, however, reassuring in his mind. "I'll do my best," I replied to him with a jumble of excitement and nervousness swirling inside of me. From that moment on, I resolved to concentrate on advancing my career and put that part of my personal life aside for the time being. I wanted to show myself and my father that I could achieve, and perhaps one day be the same kind of successful leader as he is. Right now, I've thrown myself wholeheartedly into my father's company. A business is giving and worthwhile, though it presents frequent challenges. I will definitely seize the chance to do this kind of work. But thinking back on the wedding disaster, it is clear that Stephen's in-laws were not to be unreasoned with. Some people should have made stupid people their hobby and left conducting the ceremony for couples alone. Fortunately, as the marriage was ultimately never officially registered, I got through a legally binding mistake. Now, without any family commitments of marriage and in-law complications to complicate matters, free to pursue my goal of getting ahead in life. It's liberating to think that from all that mess I have come up with a clear plan for my future. I eagerly await the possibilities that leading the company holds out. I wish myself all the best and hope that there is something valuable here for anyone who hears it. Thanks for sticking with me. And if you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to my free blog. My next video will be up soon, and you know I look forward to sharing updates and thoughts with you there. Simon's harsh words cut deep as he cruelly dismissed his son's worth, even as the child battled illness with resilience. Rachel, standing beside him, callously laughed at the scene. Witnessing their heartlessness, I made a firm decision to sever ties with them for good. "If you both feel that way, that is his grandmother, I will adopt him," I declared firmly. "Go ahead," Rachel retorted dismissively. "It's not like he has much time left anyway. Just don't come to us begging for money when it's time for his funeral, all right?" She chuckled loudly, her words devoid of compassion. Those heartless words stoked a fire of anger within me. From now on, we are strangers. Do not contact me again. "Understood. Goodbye," I said with finality. I had received crucial information about my grandson Maxim's condition from the doctor, yet I chose to cut ties without informing Simon and Rachel. When they eventually learn the truth, I am certain they will rue their callous actions. As I held Maxim close, I knew they would come to regret their behavior deeply. My name is Emily. I'm 63 years old and a housewife. My husband passed away 7 years ago, and now I live alone. It was lonely at first, but I've gotten used to it. With my husband's inheritance, my retirement fund, and my pension, I can live a comfortable and peaceful life. I have a son named Simon. He's 33 and still hasn't settled down, even though he's at the ideal age for marriage. He doesn't have a steady job and lives a carefree life. After graduating from college, he got a job but quit after 3 months because he didn't get along with his boss. He has had jobs on and off, but none of them lasted. My husband and I sometimes had to pay off Simon's debts. When my husband was alive, he often lectured Simon about his lifestyle. After my husband passed away, Simon rarely visited. In my husband's will, Simon only received a small inheritance, which might be why he was upset. I haven't kept in touch with him since. I supported Simon mentally and financially until he graduated from college, but I feel responsible for the fact that he has grown up to be so careless. I thought I had done enough for Simon until he became an adult and started his own life. I believed I didn't need to help him much after that. However, one day out of nowhere, Simon came back home without any warning. It had been 2 years since we last saw each other, and he looked different, tired and worn out. His style had changed too. He was wearing an aloha shirt, which stood out in our small town surrounded by farmlands. "Hey, I got married," he said. I was caught off guard by his news and was left in a state of shock and confusion. Seeing my surprised face, Simon clicked his tongue and called out to someone in his car. "Hey, it's okay now. Come over here." "I'm coming," a woman replied in a high-pitched voice. She stepped out of the car, dressed in a way that was hard to ignore, and looked out of place. To my surprise, a small child toddled along behind her. A child? What is going on? I thought. Look, the kid is too young for us to work properly, and we're always short of money. That's why we've come back home, Simon explained casually, as if it was no big deal. I couldn't believe how nonchalant Simon was about this surprising news. The little child, who seemed to be around 3 years old, had long hair, making it hard to tell if it was a boy or a girl. But on closer look, the child resembled Simon when he was young. "From today on, we'll be staying here," he announced. "Hello, I'm Rachel." "Nice to meet you," the woman said breezily, passing by me and entering the house as if she had always lived there. The little child tried hard to follow her, but she paid no attention and quickly went inside. Seeing this, I couldn't bring myself to turn them away, so I let them stay. As soon as they placed their luggage down, it seemed like they were about to go out. I quickly stopped them and asked for an explanation. After my husband passed away, Simon quickly met Rachel, and they started dating. Soon after, they found out she was pregnant. By the time they discovered the pregnancy, it was too late for an abortion, so they decided to have the baby. But things turned out to be more expensive than they expected, and they ran out of money, which led them back here. However, it seems they still had money for their own pleasures, just not for their child. "What? How can you be so irresponsible?" I exclaimed. "Cool, huh? Irresponsible. If you want the kid, he's a hassle. He can't even talk yet, and to be honest, just gets in the way," Simon replied. Hearing such heartless words from my own son was shocking. But what shocked me even more was seeing Rachel nod in agreement. Well, that's how it is. Looking after and loving your grandchild is a grandma's job, right? Please help us out. We're going to grab a drink near the station. "Maxim, be good and stay with Grandma," Simon said. Despite my attempts to stop them, they quickly left, ignoring everything I had to say. The station is about a 15-minute drive from our house, definitely not walking distance. Considering it's a rural area, I wasn't even sure if taxis were available. And even if they were, would Simon and Rachel use one to come back? "Hey, Maxim," I called out tentatively to my grandson. He responded with a bright, adorable smile. A smile that reminded me so much of young Simon. Seeing his smile made me smile back, though it felt like my heart was being squeezed. Such a precious smile. I knew I had to protect him from now on. Seeing Maxim's innocent smile, I made a vow in my heart to do so. During our time living together, Maxim picked up household rules quickly. He was a very bright and great child. By the time he turned 3, he could speak very well, even better than most children his age. I couldn't help but adore him. As for my eldest son and his wife, they consistently ignored Maxim, treating him like a nuisance. They had no intention of working and contributed nothing to the household expenses. They would go out drinking every day and sometimes wouldn't return for several days. This bizarre situation had become normal for Maxim, and it seemed like he cautiously observed their moves to avoid getting close to them. I couldn't stand it any longer and spoke to Rachel. "Could you spend a little more time with Maxim? After all, you are his mother." "What? Why are you saying this? I'm busy, you know. You're the one taking care of him, right?" She said without even looking at me, busy with her manicure. Claiming to be busy when she spent her days doing whatever she pleased was quite the statement. Suppressing the urge to yell at her, I thought of Maxim and pleaded once more. Maxim just turned 3. Children that age cling to their mothers when they feel lonely. Oh please, I never wanted to be a mother in the first place. Maybe it's better if he calls you Mom, isn't it? "Are you serious?" I asked, stunned. "Oh, come on, of course," she said dismissively. "I'm not. You look so scary right now," Rachel said. She must have seen the anger on my face. In the end, Rachel and I couldn't have a proper conversation about Maxim, and she just left with Simon to go drinking as usual. Maxim didn't seem to mind that his parents left. He continued flipping through his picture book. When he found his favorite fish, he excitedly pointed it out to me and tried to tell me about it with his limited words. Seeing him happy was a relief, but I couldn't stop worrying about how Simon and Rachel planned to take care of him in the future. My worries only grew when I thought about Maxim's future. With my husband's inheritance, I could cover his school fees if needed. I had no choice but to be ready for anything. As I prayed at my husband's altar, I whispered to myself. Glancing at his photo, I felt as if he was encouraging me, and I nodded in response. For 2 years after deciding to take care of Maxim, I endured living with Simon and Rachel. I watched their reckless behavior. They went out every day, often taking money from my wallet without asking. During this time, I took care of Maxim, and he barely spoke to his parents. Maxim grew up quickly, and just before he was to start elementary school, a tragedy struck. "Hello, are you Maxim's grandmother? Maxim has been taken to the hospital. Can you come immediately?" On my way back from picking up adoption paperwork from the city office, I got a call that Maxim was in the hospital. It took 2 years of living together, multiple trips to the city office, and finally, the chance to adopt Maxim was within reach. I thought I could finally separate him from Simon and Rachel, but something terrible had happened. Holding back my emotions, I rushed to the hospital where Maxim had been taken. When I arrived and asked for details, the doctor said Maxim would need to be admitted. Confused, I asked, "Doctor, what's wrong with Maxim?" "What's the problem?" "I'll explain everything once his parents arrive," the doctor replied. Waiting for Simon and Rachel, the nurse approached with a worried look, which made me uneasy. She nodded at me and whispered something to the doctor. What? The parents don't want to know about their own child's condition. The doctor's loud voice echoed through the hospital. Shocked by Simon and Rachel's indifference, realizing it was just as I expected, swallowing my pride, I knew I had to step up for Maxim. I explained our family situation to the doctor. At first, she seemed doubtful, but after seeing the detailed records, I kept on realizing that Maxim's biological parents weren't coming. She believed me and explained Maxim's condition. "Ma'am, about Maxim's condition, please stay calm. The test results show cancer in his kidneys." "What? Cancer? This can't be," I said in shock, falling from the chair I was sitting on. The pain from the fall was nothing compared to the shock of hearing that my 5-year-old grandson had cancer. The nurse helped me get up, and the doctor continued speaking. "Fortunately, there's no sign that the cancer has spread. With immediate surgery, we can save his life." "Really? If he undergoes the surgery, will he be saved?" I asked. "Yes, however, we need the parents' consent for the operation. The cancer could progress quickly, so ideally, we'd like to operate as soon as possible after explaining this to the parents." Hearing this, I felt lost. I couldn't imagine Simon and Rachel showing any concern for Maxim. As I thought about what to do, I decided to visit Maxim's room first. There I saw something I couldn't have imagined. "Hey, I heard you have cancer. The doctor was talking to your grandma in another room. Your life's in danger, and if you keep trying to live, it'll cost us more money. So do us a favor," Simon said, his voice full of disdain. Hearing these heartless words made my rage build inside me, but Maxim, looking at his parents, had a somewhat cold and mature look in his eyes that seemed far beyond his 5 years. His parents seemed taken aback, but soon started laughing again. "Really, you're such an expensive kid," Simon said mockingly. "What are you saying? You two are the ones wasting money." I burst into the room, unable to hold back any longer. Simon looked surprised, but quickly turned to Maxim and continued mocking him. "We don't need such an expensive child like you," he said cruelly to his own son, who was bravely facing his illness. Besides Simon, Rachel was laughing hysterically. Seeing their outrageous behavior, I decided to cut ties with them forever. "If that's how you feel, I, as his grandmother, will adopt him." "Go ahead," Rachel said dismissively. "He won't live long anyway. Just don't ask us for money for the funeral." She laughed loudly. Hearing this, an indescribable rage surged within me. "From now on, we are strangers. Don't ever contact me again. Got it? Goodbye." The doctor told me about my grandson Maxim's health condition, but I didn't share it with my eldest son and his wife. Instead, I decided to cut ties with them. When they find out the truth, I'm sure they will regret their choices. As I gently hugged Maxim, I had a strong feeling that they would regret what they had done. I told Maxim about his cancer and the upcoming surgery. I reassured him not to worry about the cost and asked him to go through with the operation. "Maxim, I want you to live. I know the surgery might be scary, but you will recover. I'll be right here with you." "Grandma, if you're with me, I'm not afraid of anything." "I'll go through the surgery and treatment, I promise," Maxim replied. Seeing Maxim trying to smile, and not to worry me even after hearing such harsh words from his own parents, I hugged him tightly. I also told him about the adoption process I had been preparing. Maxim seemed a bit worried at first, but eventually accepted it. That night, I discussed the adoption with my eldest son and his wife, who were drinking at home. They always said they didn't want a child because of the costs and didn't really care about Maxim. To make them leave my house, I offered them a significant amount of money to stay away from us forever. Without any hesitation, they signed the adoption papers, and showed no signs of regret or attachment to Maxim. They looked happy about getting the money and quickly left the house. During the talk, they didn't even glance at or speak a word to Maxim, who was sick. Their lack of responsibility as parents saddened me, but I was relieved that one source of pain for Maxim was now gone. Soon after, Maxim had the surgery, which thankfully was successful. Being young, he recovered quickly and was soon ready to be discharged. "Doctor, thank you so much," I said. "Congratulations on your discharge," the doctor replied. "I'm glad. If you ever feel something's wrong, come see me right away." "Yes, understood," Maxim responded. During his stay at the hospital, Maxim grew close to the doctor and hugged him in gratitude. Once back home, Maxim lay down on his bed and said, "Grandma, thank you so much for letting me have the surgery." "Oh, don't mention it. I'm your parent now, and it's what parents should do. You must be tired today. Get some good rest, okay?" "I'll take a short nap," Maxim said, quickly falling into a deep sleep and snoring lightly. Not long after, I received a call from the hospital. Oh no, did I leave something at the hospital? I thought, answering the phone quickly. "Hello, sorry for the sudden call. Actually, someone from a TV station came to the hospital, and they really wanted to meet Maxim." "A person from a TV station? Why Maxim?" I was completely puzzled, and my mind was filled with questions. After listening carefully, I found out that during Maxim's stay at the hospital, he became friends with a writer who was there for an interview. The writer had shared some of Maxim's stories online, and they were well received by the public. This led to discussions about turning them into a movie. I was utterly surprised. I hadn't known about this since Maxim had talked to the writer outside of my visiting hours. They told me that if it becomes a movie, Maxim wouldn't act in it, and they wouldn't use his real name. But since it's his story, people who know him might recognize it's about him. I see. Let me think about it. I'd like to discuss it with Maxim too, I said, wanting to think calmly. I decided to hang up the phone for now. Maxim woke up, rubbing his sleepy eyes. When I told him about the call from the hospital, his eyes sparkled with joy. "Really? Is my story going to be a movie that everyone watches?" "It seems so. They said they'll hide your real name and make the movie." I explained, "Why? It's fine. Let them use my name." Maxim replied, "But if they use your real name, everyone will know about your illness and our family situation." I said, surprised by his reaction. Facing my surprise, Maxim answered with an innocent smile, "Because I want to tell everyone I have such a wonderful grandma like you." "Oh, Maxim, thank you," I said, tears welling up in my eyes because of his kindness. I never expected to hear such heartwarming words from him. That night's dinner tastes saltier than usual, but I felt deeply happy and fulfilled. The movie preparations went smoothly. While the film didn't use Maxim's real name, he was introduced as the inspiration for the story. The movie became a huge hit after its release, with theaters packed every day. I watched it myself, and even though I already knew the story, it was still a moving experience. I couldn't hold back my tears watching the touching scenes of a loving grandmother and her smart grandson trying to survive together. Later, Maxim was invited to many events to talk about his story. On days when he didn't have school, he led a busy life wanting to support other kids his age who were fighting cancer. Having gone through it himself, he wanted to cheer them on. I did my best to support him. Thanks to the many lectures he gave, Maxim's bank account grew enough for a lifetime. With this money, he could focus on his treatment without worrying about finances if his illness came back. Even if something happened to me, there would be more than enough money for him to attend university without any concerns. Thinking about the future, I carefully stored his bank passbook, knowing it would be essential one day. After living this way for a while, my eldest son and his wife, who we hadn't heard from in about 3 years, suddenly showed up at our house. It seemed they had lost a lot of money through gambling and were now in serious debt. As soon as they saw Maxim, they approached him with the same sleazy smiles they always used. "Oh, Maxim, you've grown so much. It's been a while since we last saw you. Don't you miss your mom and dad? Exactly, we took care of you when you were a baby. Don't you think you owe us?" Rachel added. Despite abandoning Maxim as soon as they found out about his illness, my eldest son and his wife were still as selfish as ever. Facing them, Maxim gave them a cold look and said, "Who are you?" At his unexpected words, both Simon and Rachel were taken aback, their mouths tightening. Trying not to laugh at their reactions, I stepped between them and Maxim to continue the conversation. "Excuse me, but who might you be?" "Do you have some business with my son Maxim?" I asked. "What are you talking about? Maxim is my son. That makes him your grandson," Simon said angrily. But I looked at them with a cold stare. Under my gaze, Simon flinched for a moment, but then he turned to Maxim with a pleading tone. "Listen, Maxim, I messed up. I lost more money than I thought in horse racing. I'm in a really bad situation now. Can you help me out? If I had $30,000, it would be enough. Please." $30,000. That much, I exclaimed, shocked by the unexpected amount. No matter the reason, a debt of $30,000 from gambling was unthinkable. My late husband and I always warned Simon about gambling and going into debt, but it seemed like he didn't listen at all. The money Maxim saved came from the fees he received for giving lectures. He went through a lot to earn that money, sharing his painful memories in front of many people. I told Simon and Rachel, "You too can't use his hard-earned money just for your enjoyment." Then I firmly closed the front door in Simon's face. Outside, my eldest son and his wife started shouting and complaining, making such a loud noise that I had to call the police. Soon after, the noise stopped, and it seemed like they had given up and gone home. However, they didn't give up that easily. The next morning, they started causing a scene in front of our house again. "Mom, please listen. I've changed. I'm turning over a new leaf. I'm sorry for everything. Please let me in," Simon pleaded. "Maxim, I'm so sorry. From now on, I'll be with you and take care of you properly. So please let me in," Rachel added. They kept knocking on the front door early in the morning, annoying the whole neighborhood. Despite their constant noise, Maxim calmly continued his breakfast inside. Eventually, he went to the entrance, but I didn't hear the door unlock. Curious, I quietly checked what was happening. Instead of opening the door, Maxim was watching them from a small window near the entrance. They kept knocking, unaware of his gaze. Maxim then made a proposal. "All right, I'll give you a few questions. If you answer even one correctly, we can live together." "Really? Just like that? Despite everything, you're still a kid at heart, aren't you?" "What's the question?" "I'll answer anything," Simon replied, sounding relieved and cheerful. After a brief pause, Maxim asked the first question. "First question, tell me my favorite and least favorite foods." Hey, Rachel, you should know this, right?" Simon stammered, clearly clueless. Rachel, trying to help, thought for a moment and answered confidently. "Any mother would know that your favorites are pudding and chiffon cake. And you hate bell peppers, don't you?" Hearing their answer, it was clear they didn't know Maxim at all. I sighed quietly without them noticing, feeling a mix of sadness and frustration. Maxim looked down at the couple from the window and asked, "Are you sure that's your final answer?" Of course. It's unthinkable for a mother not to know her own son's likes and dislikes, Rachel said confidently from outside. She seemed certain about her answer. Hearing this, Maxim laughed heartily. The couple, not expecting to be laughed at, were probably flustered. After a good laugh, Maxim, now calm, replied to Rachel, "That's wrong." "What a shame." "What? You always looked so happy when there were cakes, didn't you?" Rachel insisted. "That was Dad's favorite, not mine. I used to have an egg allergy, so I don't eat things like pudding or cakes with eggs. I love the egg-free cakes Grandma makes, and I hate whipped cream, but I absolutely love bell peppers." "Is that true?" Rachel asked, shocked. Before coming to my house, Maxim was only given cheap instant porridges and slices of bread. I often wondered how he managed to stay healthy with such a poor diet. The reason Maxim didn't get sick was largely because of the meals he got at daycare. The principal noticed his diet was lacking and provided allergy-friendly meals, carefully monitoring his health. When she warned Rachel about her poor parenting and threatened to report her to child services, Rachel decided to stop sending Maxim to daycare and moved in with me. Hey, how long do you think we've been apart? How would I know what you like now?" Rachel said, frustrated. "That next question, what is my birthday?" Maxim asked. "Your birthday?" Rachel and Simon looked confused. Maxim's birthday was actually today. Normally, a parent wouldn't forget their child's birthday, especially a mother. But despite this simple question, the couple showed no sign of knowing the answer. "Why aren't you answering? It's such an easy question, isn't it?" Maxim asked. "Oh, of course, I know that, right, Simon?" Rachel said, turning to Simon. "Yes, of course, I know that," Simon replied in a panicked voice, but it was clear they didn't know the answer. "If you don't know, you should just admit it," Maxim said. Even after waiting for about 10 minutes, they still didn't answer. Maxim muttered under his breath, and his sad expression showed that he was hurt that his own parents didn't remember his birthday. My heart ached for him. "No, wait, I just had a brain fart. Of course, I know your birthday." Rachel tried to cover up her mistake. I know it, Rachel said. "You just caught me off guard. It slipped my mind. Can you give me a hint?" she asked, trying to cover up. In response to their silly excuses, Maxim laughed out loud, but I could see tears forming in his eyes. Feeling bad for Maxim, I quietly moved closer and held his hand. He was surprised to see me, but he nodded, wiped away his tears, and looked straight at his parents. Hey, real parents remember their child's birthday without needing hints. "I've never been celebrated by you two, so I expected this," Maxim said. "What? After all I did to give birth to you, and this is how you repay me? You should be grateful." Rachel snapped back, starting to get angry. Maxim gave her a cold look, and she went quiet. "Well, here's the last question. It's an easy one," Maxim said. "I was diagnosed with cancer and treated at a hospital. Which organ was affected?" This was a question any parent should easily answer, especially since Maxim's illness had been on TV for several days. But their responses were unexpected. "Wasn't it the heart?" Simon asked. "No, it was the stomach, right?" Rachel added. I was so shocked I leaned back and looked up at the ceiling. Despite Maxim's story being a hot topic, my son and his wife showed they had no interest in him at all. Hearing this, Maxim must have thought, I never expected it to be this bad. I felt sorry for him, but to my surprise, he started laughing. "Thanks, I get it now." "It's worse than I thought," Maxim said. "What? Did we miss something?" Rachel asked, puzzled by Maxim's reaction. Maxim smiled, but his eyes were not smiling. "It was kidney cancer. You claim to be my family, but you know nothing about me. The only one I consider my family is Grandma Emily. Shouldn't you be grateful I gave birth to you?" Rachel asked, still angry. That's the point. To me, the only one I can call a parent is Grandma Emily, Maxim said. Oh, looks like my ride's here. Please don't bother coming here again. Maxim left them with those words and closed the window with a bang. Outside, my son and his wife were shouting in anger, but when the police arrived and warned them, they immediately stopped, and everything went quiet. I was worried that Maxim might have been hurt by this, but he looked relieved and smiled at me. What I said to them just now, that they are not my parents, is truly how I feel. I've always wanted to call you Mom, but I was too shy to say it. Can I call you that? Of course, Maxim, thank you, I replied, deeply touched by his words. I hugged Maxim tightly, tears in my eyes. Mom, you're squeezing too hard, he said, but he hugged me back just as tightly. As for those two, they claimed they had lost their son to me and were saying nonsense like I was being deceived by him. But everything they did to Maxim is documented and recorded, including testimonies from his kindergarten and the parenting diary I kept. The police reviewed the evidence and dismissed their claims. Still, the police contacted us to verify the facts. The officers seemed frustrated with the stubborn claims of my eldest son and his wife. After the call from the police, Maxim went to the police station alone to see them. When he came back, he looked refreshed. I said my final goodbyes to them and told the police everything about the terrible things they've done. They won't have a normal life for a while, I guess, Maxim said. He showed me the evidence he had mentioned. Shockingly, there was footage of the couple committing theft and exchanging money with a stranger. It seemed they believed they could live comfortably off the royalties if they could get Maxim on their side. They even planned to sell him to someone involved in shady dealings in the black market. Seeing their terrible plan, I was in shock and felt chills down my spine. I never thought my own son could be so cruel to his own child. Maxim spoke softly to me, seeing I was dumbfounded. I asked the manager to look into it, and we found out this shocking truth. I thought if you found out, you might be so shocked that you faint. That's why I kept it a secret. I'm sorry. It's okay, Maxim. I'd do anything for you and always have your back. It's even scarier to not know about such terrible things. I'm really sorry for hiding it from you all this time. The only one who worries about me this much is you, Mom. That's why I want to protect you too from now on, Maxim said with a slightly embarrassed look. Seeing Maxim's shy expression, tears of joy welled up in my eyes. Even though he has faced many hardships and seems mature for a 9-year-old, that shy expression made him look just like a child, which warmed my heart. My heart warmed as I thought about my eldest son and his wife. They were later found guilty of many other crimes and ended up serving nearly 9 years in prison. They never showed any remorse or apologized. The letters they sent, collected by Maxim's manager, still demand repayment for bringing him into the world. Maxim continues to visit hospitals to encourage sick children. He's now in middle school and has hit puberty, but his kind and honest nature remains the same. He's living a good life. Lately, it seems he has a girlfriend. I see him sneaking out for dates and can't help but think how cute he is. The cancer we worried about shows no signs of coming back, and his recovery is going well. Although it's impossible to say it will never return, regular checkups are essential. For now, he's living just like any other kid his age and seems happy every day. I still fuss over Maxim and nag him a lot. Naturally, there are times when he gets annoyed, but taking care of him gives my life meaning. I hope Maxim can bear with me a little longer. My biggest goal now is to live long enough to see Maxim's wedding. As a parent, if I'm being greedy, I'd love to see the face of Maxim's child, my great-grandchild. To make sure I stay healthy until then, I started going to the gym. Because of this, people around me are often surprised and call me a lively and young grandmother. For Maxim's sake, I'll strive to be a mother he can proudly show off for as long as possible. I'm going to keep pushing forward.